can be super frustrating when you're knitting to come across an error and have to frog, which is so annoying. It's like my least favorite part of knitting. And if your count's wrong, sometimes you have to, but some errors we can actually fix. And so today I'm going to show you some common mistakes that we can make in our knitting and how to fix them. So looking at this little sample piece that I've got here, you can see that there's a few things wrong with it. So the first is we've got a dropped stitch over here. You can see this little loop here where that stitch has come loose. It's been dropped and I haven't realized, and it's all the way back down here. So we're going to need to fix that. We've got something going on here. So what's actually happened here is this section of stitches are twisted, and I'll show you what that means in a second. So we need to fix that. And then also you can see this little bump here, we've done a purl stitch instead of a knit stitch. So we need to fix that. So that's our 3 errors in this little section of knitting that I'm going to show you how to fix today. So let's start by securing the dropped stitch, because we don't want it to keep laddering down. If that's just left there, that's going to keep pulling all the way down. So as soon as we notice it, we need to do something about it. And so you can grab a safety pin. You can use a stitch marker as well, like a pin style stitch marker. But I just wanted to keep it simple today to show you, you can fix this stuff without special tools. So I've got a crochet hook here to work with as well, but you don't necessarily need it. I will show you how to work without that. So before we can fix that stitch, we need to knit across to it. And that's why we're securing it so it doesn't keep laddering down while we're working. So on our way across here, let's fix these problems here. So the first thing we're going to need to do is fix these twisted stitches. So you can see this funny bump here. And if you have a look closely, I'm hoping this will work. So you can kind of see there, if I pull that stitch open, it's the left leg of the stitch that is at the front. So if I kind of flatten that like that, so you can see on the right hand side that's coming from behind the needle, and it's the left coming over the top. But what you want with your knit stitches, if I can open one of these up enough for you, is maybe on the clear, is you want the right hand side on the front. So this is what we call a twisted stitch. So what we're going to do, that's actually one of the easiest fixes. So you're going to push this across, and you can see the funny bump where I've swapped. And so what can cause this is if you're knitting in the back loop accidentally. In this instance, I created these by pulling my yarn around clockwise instead of anti-clockwise as I went through. So what I'm going to do, so normally for a knit stitch, I would be coming in from the front like this to create this stitch. This is English style knitting. I have my working yarn in my right hand. So normally I'd come like that to knit. And so I'll show you what that looks like on a twisted stitch. So you can see it's kind of, for one, it's really tight to knit. So it's going to muck up your tension, but it just looks, so you can see that bit of a twist in there. It's not smooth like the other stitches. So I'm just going to undo those stitches there. So it's a really easy fix. What we're going to do is we're actually going to knit through the back loop. So instead of coming from the front like this, you're going to come around and just knit through the back of your previous stitch like that. And that's actually going to untwist your stitch as you go. And that's going to bring that right hand side across to where it needs to go. So again, I'm not coming in through, can you see how hard that is for me to try and get in through the front? So even if you can't recognize a twisted stitch, if you're finding that's really awkward like that to get in, just check where your legs are, and the left is in front. Okay, it's twisted. Let's knit through the back loop like that. So just coming in from behind and knitting around, and you'll see once we get across here to where the problem is, which is just here. So just continuing to check each stitch, even though I can see this visible change here, I am just double checking each stitch to make sure. And so you can see back to this one, and it's on the right hand side. And so I would be right to knit that as usual, except we need to fix this stitch here. So now we've knit across to here. That's all untwisted there. Okay, and so we don't want to keep going in the back loop because then that's, if I go through the back loop there, that's going to start twisting those stitches again. Can you see that bit of a twist there? Instead of a nice neat V, it's kind of come across. Okay, so I'm going to take that off. And I just need to fix that now because it's, oh, I've done a, oh, look there, I've dropped a stitch again. Okay, so that's all fully untwisted. Okay, so our next problem is we need to fix this purl stitch. So I've accidentally, I'll just flatten this so you can see that purl stitch again properly now that we've got rid of the twist. So you can see we've got all these lovely V's here and then this one bump here. So what we're going to do to fix that one, it's quite an easy fix, but it can feel a little bit scary if you haven't done it before, is I am going to deliberately drop the stitch of that, and I'm going to carefully pull it down. So you can see I've just got my thumb on the purl there so you can see. Right, and then we need to come to the row below the purl. Okay, so there's two ways we can now fix this. The easy way that I do, if it's only one stitch, is I'll pick it up with my working needle, pick up the yarn above it, keep it on the left, and then just pull that over like that. And you can do that all the way up. If you have so you can just, because this is nice and loose, this is really easy to do with just your knitting needles. And you can go all the way up like that. Make sure that's not twisted like that. And see, that's all now knit stitch. And you can do it the opposite way, turn a knit stitch into a purl just by doing the reverse. So you can just drop it back down. I'll go down just a couple to show you. Okay, but what we need is we actually, if I just pull that over like that, I'm going to create another knit stitch. So we actually need to switch the order. So this is the yarn from behind, this is the stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to just pull it over to this other needle so that my stitch is on the left-hand side, my yarn is on the right. And then again, I'm just going to pull that over like that. And now you can see there's that bump in the front, the purl bump. And then if I just grab that next yarn above it, so you can see just by changing the order of the yarn, I've turned a knit stitch into a purl stitch. So that's a really easy, good fix if you're doing a pattern that is like knit and purl and you miss a purl stitch, or sometimes if you purl in the wrong spot, it makes it easy to correct it. Sometimes an error like that you can live with and just let it keep going, but sometimes it really stands out, and so it's fabulous to have a nice easy way to change those stitches to what it needs to be. So that's the second error that we've now fixed. So we've untwisted our stitches, we've converted the purl to a knit. You can see that that's a little bit loose there where I've been working, but I'll come back to that at the end and I'll show you after we've done the drop stitch. So I'm now going to knit across to our dropped stitch. So I'm just going to quickly come across here. Okay, so as I get closer, I'm kind of keeping an eye on where that drop is, so I can see where it needs to go. So I can kind of trace up that gap. So I can see this, there's the drop stitch there, find the stitch next to it and follow that leg up. So I need to knit across to this stitch here to find my gap. Just double checking that I'm in the right spot, which I am. Now, depending on how far it is since you dropped your stitch, you can come up with a problem like we've got here. As you can see because I've been keeping my tension consistent, there's a little bit of a bump there, but this has come in really firmly. So there's not much of a gap there. So we've got these nice loose bits, which would work using just the needle method like we used for the other stitch. But because that gets a bit tight, I'm going to show you with the crochet hook. So you can just use a regular crochet hook. There are like specific mending crochet hooks, but just a regular one works. This one's slightly smaller. I'll just show you. It's slightly smaller than the needle, but it's still chunky enough that it will work with this particular yarn. Okay, so I'm just going to insert it through the dropped hook. I've taken that safety pin out. I'm just going to grab that yarn and I'm going to loop it through. I'm going to go up. Depending on the yarn that you're using and how tight your tension is, just do take care not to split the yarn that you're working with. Okay, so you can see here it's starting to get a little bit tighter. It's going to be a little bit trickier, so I'm just going to have to fiddle that a little bit just to open it up to pick up the yarn between stitches. Just making sure I'm not missing. Yeah, so there's one in there. See, that was a bit tricky to see because of how firm the tension was. I was nearly going to go there, which would leave this one undone, and it would still look fine. It would still look like a knit stitch, but then it just wouldn't sit quite right because you've got one stitch covering the height of two. And so it'd be one of those little errors that might stand out a little bit on your finished piece, depending on what you're doing. And so you can see that that's getting a little trickier because it's getting tight with that tension there. And so I'm just going to give that a nice solid pull, just so I've got enough yarn to get it up. And I'm just going to be careful. I need to get it over onto my left-hand needle and just making sure I'm getting it on correctly. So you can see again, like we were talking about, the right-hand side is on the front, and that's that left hand. I'll just go through so you can see it. That's that left-hand side there behind. And then we can continue knitting across with our dropped stitch all picked up. And so once we get to the end of the row, we can then spread it out and have a look. So let's take a look at where we've fixed up. So just trying to not stretch it out too far. Okay, so you can see there, that's looking better already, but we can see over here where we've been playing, it's a little bit loose and open, and there's just something bubbly in here. So let's have a bit of a fidget here. And so I'm just going to, oh, I can see we've got a problem here. Okay, so I've actually got two twisted stitches there. So depending on what I was making, I could do something similar to what we did over here with the purl stitch, is I could come back here, drop that stitch, bring it down to below that twist, and then crochet it back up to get rid of that twist. But it, yeah, just depends on your project, your own tolerance for errors for that. So, but if you can see, a knit stitch is normally a nice neat V. You can kind of see there how this part of the stitch, you see how it's kind of coming from the left and across. It's not kind of coming from the middle. You can see where that extra leg is being tucked underneath. So that's what the twisted stitches look like when they're finished, and that's why we fixed it up here, knitting through the back leg. So aside from the twisted stitches, that part's fine. And so over here, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull it a bit like this and down. And it can take a few more repeats just as you go through, just to get that balance and that tension. So you can see that that bit of a stretch has actually improved that already. And so all I did there was just stretch it in both directions and just kind of give it a little massage, and it's smooth. Oh, I've made it wobble again. Sorry, my table's not very steady today, is it? And so you can, if you want, kind of fiddle the lines like that, but just a few stretches left and right, up and down, and that's kind of come together like that. And that is how I fix some basic errors in my knitting. So we've covered twisted stitches, straightening them up, changing a purl to a knit, and correcting a dropped stitch. And we've got those couple of twisted stitches, but looking at that overall, it's actually looking pretty good. If you have anything else you would like to see me cover about knitting or any other crafts, please do leave a comment. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you again soon.